Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another installment of Cooking with Shane. I hope you were able to try the mini pigs in a blanket last week, and I hope you had fun with them. And this week we're going to have even more fun because we're making a really rich dessert. So last week we did the 3 little pigs in a blanket. This week we are going to do Hansel and Gretel gingerbread ice cream sandwiches. So we're actually going to make gingerbread ice cream and gingerbread cookies. So we're going to start with the ice cream. So this is an ice cream. If you've done the program before, we've made this before. This is a no churn. You don't need a special machine for it. This is a really simple ice cream that you can make at home that doesn't need any special equipment. So I'm going to show you just how easy it is to make. So this one, we are going to make, like I said, gingerbread flavored ice cream. So we've got to take a few steps to get there. We're going to start by making a base for our ice cream. So all ice creams start with a base flavor. So we're going to do that now. We're going to get our heat going. And we're going to take a half a cup of heavy cream or heavy whipping cream, whichever you have. So this is a whole cup. I'm using a half of it because I don't have my half cup. So this is part of that where sort of math comes in. If you have a whole and you know you only need half, you only fill it halfway. So we're going to put that right into our pot. And we are going to add some very typical gingerbread flavored spices. So we're going to use a teaspoon of cinnamon, which is usually the predominant flavor. Apparently I've not used this cinnamon before, so we get to open a nice fresh cinnamon. Alright, so a teaspoon of cinnamon. Helps to put the right cover back on. Alright, now we're going to do allspice, which is another very typical. Now allspice is one of those that's really strong. So if you don't like it, I don't always actually put allspice in my gingerbread. It's a really, really strong flavor, and you're going to put clove in just a second. The combination of both can be too strong for some people, so if it's too strong and you just don't like a really strong tasting gingerbread, just don't put the allspice in, or just even put less in. I mean, it's only a half a teaspoon. Maybe put a quarter of a teaspoon in, maybe a little bit less. So we're going to throw the allspice in. Now we're going to go to our clove, which kind of gives you that really sort of bite flavor in your gingerbread. And this is even less. This is only a quarter. So we're going to put that in. You do need the clove, so you need a little bit. So you got to put a little bit. If you want to skip one, skip the allspice. But you kind of have to have that clove. And then a little bit of nutmeg. Again, that's just a typical flavor. We're going to use another quarter of a teaspoon. And about a half a teaspoon, oh, another new one, of ginger. So obviously, gingerbread has to have ginger in it. So we're going to use about a half, maybe a little more than half. If you have fresh grated ginger, you can do that too. I tend to like the grated for this because I don't like the chunks of grated in my ice cream, and I don't like the chunks of grated in my cookie. Some people don't mind the chunks, but I don't know. There's some extra chewy that you don't need. So we're going to let this come up to a simmer, and we're going to just kind of stir it. I don't have a whisk, so I'm just going to use mine. You sort of improvise. I left my whisk, so I'm not going to leave my whisk. We're just going to stir this, and we're going to let it come up to what's called a simmer. So when you have a simmer, it's just starting to boil around the outside. So you don't want this to come to a big boil where there's lots of big bubbles. You just kind of want little teeny tiny bubbles around the outside. And because if you overboil it, if you boil it too hard, which would be your hard boil, Your milk fats can separate from, you know, the actual, like the liquid, the milk and the water that's in here will separate from the fat. You kind of get like a chunky, curdy, gross thing. So we don't want to do that. We just kind of want a nice, smooth, creamy base. So we're going to let this simmer. We're going to let this come up to a simmer. And when that does, we're going to kind of show you what that looks like. Alright, so what you'll notice is it's just, obviously you'll notice the steam coming out, and again, that's sort of a surefire way of knowing you're getting close. So when you whisk it and you kind of stop whisking, you'll notice that little bubbles start forming around the edge. You can kind of see them popping right here. That's about, if you want to turn it down, you don't want this to boil too hard, you can kind of turn it down. So you're going to let this simmer for about 2 minutes. So you can get all the flavors of the spices. They're going to like cook right into that cream. And then we're going to add another layer of flavor once our 2 minutes has come up. And you kind of want to stir this too while this is going on. You don't want that cream to burn onto the bottom. There's nothing worse than scorched milk. Really, that burnt. There's nothing you can do to fix it. Once you get it, if you burn it, it's fine. Just throw it out. You don't want to use it. So we're going to let this continue to simmer for another 30 seconds or so. And then we are going to add our next level of flavor. So we've let this simmer for 2 minutes. Now it's time to add our next level of flavor, which is going to be our actual real whole ginger. So if you've never seen ginger, it's kind of funky looking. It's kind of a root, so it's got a really thick skin, and it kind of looks like a little hand. You got these little fingers, and it kind of looks like the palm of a hand. So this is what ginger looks like. You can find it in almost every store. And you really do want the fresh ginger for this part. Grated ginger is really good, but it doesn't have as strong a flavor as the fresh stuff. And to really get the ginger flavor, we're going to put this into our cream, and we're going to do what's called steeping, which is pulling out the flavor of the ginger. So we need about an inch piece of this. So we're just going to cut off an inch piece. And ginger is really kind of fibrous, and it's really kind of tough to get through. So you want a parent to help you with this part. But all we're going to do is we're going to just peel off the outside. Just be really careful. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut this up into little tiny slices. Now you could put this whole chunk in, but you're not going to get all the flavor out of it. It's the same way you would with cutting this into smaller pieces. So if we cut this into smaller pieces, obviously you're going to be able to extract more of the flavor, because each piece, all the flavor is going to come out of each piece. If we just put this whole chunk in here, you're really not going to get a lot of the flavor out of the middle. So we're just going to cut this up into little slices. And we're going to put it right in here. And we're also going to add a little bit of vanilla at this point. So we need about a teaspoon of vanilla. I was always told that a capful is the same thing as a teaspoon. I don't know. I've never actually tried it. But I've always followed that rule. So you're just going to stir this together. So we have taken this off the heat right now. We don't want to cook the ginger. We just want to pull the flavor out of it. So the cream is really hot. It's going to just sort of encapsulate or cover up all of that ginger. And it's going to call what we call steeping. So we said that before. It basically all it's doing is the cream is pulling out all the flavor from the ginger, and it's just going to make that ginger, the cream filling, the cream mixture, just really infused with that ginger flavor. So we're going to let this set for about 20 minutes. And and then we will move on to the next step. So our cream mixture has steeped for 20 minutes, and I've taken the ginger out. I just set it off to the side. We don't need it anymore. So all we're going to do now is put this into a bowl, cover it up, and put it in the fridge. So you'll notice there isn't a whole lot here. What we have done is we've created a lot of flavor in a very little bit of milk mixture. So once this comes to cool down, it's going to strengthen that flavor even more. So we're just going to cover this up for now. We're going to put it in the fridge, and we'll head on to our next step. Okay, so our steeped cream mixture is cooled off. So now we're going to make the rest of the base for our gingerbread ice cream, and then we're going to whip some cream, and then we're going to fold them together. That's all we're going to do for ice cream. It's incredibly simple if you've never made it this way, and it really does taste and feel just like regular ice cream. So to continue with the base, we have 1 can of sweetened condensed milk, and we're going to add to that about 2 tablespoons of molasses. So we're going to eyeball this because it doesn't matter too much. There's 1, there's 2. If you really want to measure it, you absolutely can, but it's not going to affect anything. The more you add, it's actually going to add a little bit more of a molassesy flavor. So we're just going to mix this all together until it's nice. You don't want to see any streaks. So it's actually going to look kind of like caramel. Alright, so we're going to set that off to the side for now. We're going to add our cooled gingerbread flavored cream to the bowl. And we are going to add the rest of the cream. So it's 2 cups of cream. And we're going to whisk this until you get nice soft peaks. Just preparing my pan here. So we've got our 2 cups of cream in here and our ½ cup of the steeped ginger flavored cream. And we're just going to whisk this. We're going to start slow. We're going to make sure we're plugged in here first. Alright. So we're going to start this on slow to kind of let it thicken up a little bit. You don't want to go high right off the bat because cream is going to go flying everywhere. You start slow until it thickens a little bit, and then as it thickens, you increase your speed. So this is probably going to take 2 to 3 minutes, and we're looking for a stiff peak. This is thickening up a little bit. There's air incorporating in here, so I can turn this up a little bit. But you want to go a little bit at a time. You don't want to do a whole bunch. You just kind of want to go with 1 speed at a time. You'll start to get to a point where you actually see the whips leave sort of a trail in your cream. You turn it up a little bit more at this point. so when you get to the point where it's pretty thick, you want to kind of do a test to make sure you're not under whipping it, but you're not over whipping it. So basically, a stiff peak, when you turn your blades up, the little peaks that form on top don't flop over. That's sort of a soft peak. You don't want them to flop over. You want them to stand up nice and firm. But you don't want to go too firm because you can actually turn this into butter and it's too thick and you can't do anything with it. So this is perfect. I'm just going to give it one little get all that off. Alright. And then all we have left to do is sort of fold this together. So you're going to dump the molasses and the sweetened condensed milk into your whipped cream. And then you're going to fold. So folding is a technique where you're stirring, but you're not vigorously stirring. You don't want to break up all the air pockets that you just made in here. So you want to kind of go halfway around the bowl and then kind of pull it over. Turn your bowl as you go. You just kind of want to keep doing that until all of the whipped cream coloring is gone. You don't want any streaks in here. This will all sort of be one light gingerbread color. Again, you just want to kind of fold it over. Instead of like really stirring it, you're going to fold it. You're going to do that until you see all of the big lumps of the whipped cream are out. And if you see a couple of lumps that just won't kind of fold out, you can kind of push them down, but you don't want to stir it. You worked hard to get all that air in there. You don't want to let all that air out. So this is looking good. You've got a nice looking gingerbread base. So all we're going to do, one little lump there, get him out of there, is we have a loaf pan, just a bread loaf pan. It's lined with plastic wrap. And we're just going to pour this in. We're going to cover it with plastic. And then we're going to put it in the fridge. And when it's ready, we'll make our sandwiches. Alright, so our ice cream is in the freezer. It is chilling and it is going to set up nice. And it's going to be delicious. So while that is chilling up, we're going to go ahead and make our cookies. So this is just basically a molasses cookie. Which does basically have all the same flavorings as gingerbread, so we're just going to call it a gingerbread cookie. But it's just a typical molasses cookie. So again, I know I've talked before, if you've done the program before, whenever you're baking, usually you're dividing your steps into two. You put your dry ingredients together, and then you put your wet ingredients together, and then you combine them. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to get our dry ingredients going. So we're going to start off with 2 1/4 cups of flour. And we're actually going to sift this. Sometimes I don't sift depending on what I'm making, but I'm going to sift this today because there's a lot of ingredients going in. And I want to make sure that all of the lumps and chunks of flour and baking soda are nice and sifted, because you never want to get a big bite of baking soda or a big bite of salt. So that's 2 cups. Now we've got our 1/4 cup. Alright, so now the basic flavoring is in your spices. So we're going to do 2 teaspoons of ground ginger. So obviously with gingerbread, we're going to have a strong ginger flavor. 1, 2. And then we're going to do a teaspoon of baking soda. A 1/2 teaspoon of cloves. So again, the clove is pretty strong, but you do really need it. So if you don't like the really strong, just put a little bit less in it. But the clove is just what kind of gives it that bite. We need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And we're just going to sift this. So we're just going to lightly tap the side so it all goes through the sifter. So this is basically going to give you a nice fine, that's another reason we're sifting too, because this is going to give you a nice fine, what they call a crumb. So when you bite into it, it's going to give you a nice tender cookie. The more fine your powder, the more tender whatever you're making is going to be. Alright, so the reason we sift it is this baking soda a lot of times becomes really clumped together. So you're just going to use your fingers and press it down so it goes through the screen. Especially when it's humid like this, you get those big clumps. So when it's really humid out, you want to make sure you're sifting everything. Alright, so that is our dry ingredients. Simple. We're going to set them off to the side, and we're going to basically make what we call our wet ingredients. So all we need is 3/4 cup of margarine, so that's 1.5 sticks. 1 stick is 1/2 cup. So if I use a whole other stick, that would give me a whole cup. So I got to cut this in half to give me 3/4 cup. So I don't want a whole cup. And 1 cup of sugar. And this margarine, you want to soften it a little bit. You don't want it hard. You don't want to take it just out of the fridge because you're not going to be able to cream this very good. So you want to take it out and either set it out on the table or your workspace, a half hour before, just kind of put it in the microwave for 10-15 seconds. So we're just going to cream this until it's nice and soft and fluffy. So again, whenever you're using your mixer, you always put your beaters on the bottom of the bowl before you start it. Because if you don't, I have done that before, it's fun. It's no fun to clean up, trust me. So we're going to start on the lowest speed and work our way up. So you'll notice there's always sort of repetition in everything we do. You never want to start on the highest because then that takes the whole point of putting your beaters on the bottom. It's just going to throw your flour or your sugar everywhere. So we're going to start on 1. And then as you notice that the sugar is starting to get more incorporated into that butter, it's really going to sort of whip into that margarine, I think. Then you can start turning it up a little bit. And then when you notice there's no more sugar in there, it's all worked into the butter, you can turn it right up high. And then you're going to mix it for about a minute. Was that a minute? Was anybody counting? I think we're pretty good. So we're just going to put it on the lowest, get that butter. Okay, so all we have to add to this is we're going to beat in our egg. So this is just going to add a level of fat, and that's going to just give you a nice richer flavor. Mix this in. Again, start on 1. And actually with this, you don't have to go up any speed. You can just start on 1 and leave it on 1 until that egg is gone. You won't see any of the moisture from it. Alright. So for now we need Another level of flavor that's really potent in your gingerbread is your molasses flavor. And I don't know, I don't have any cooking spray, but a tip for today, if you have cooking spray, so if you're ever using like honey or molasses, if you have cooking spray, just spray the inside of your measuring cup, pour it in, and it's just going to like slide right off. That's going to sort of create a barrier, so it's not going to like stick to the side. It's all going to like come right out. It's almost like a miracle work. It is a beautiful thing. I don't have spray today, so we'll do what we can. I don't know if you can see, but all that is left over from my molasses. If you had the spray, none of that would be in there. Alright, and then we're just going to put 1 tablespoon of water in here. And this is just going to thin it out just a little bit. So we're going to start on 1 again. You're just going to mix it until it's all incorporated. You don't want to see any of the butter color any of the butter color. And what you'll have is sort of a nice creamed molasses looking mixture. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sift in we're going to beat in our dry ingredients, and we're going to do this in steps. Just because this is pretty thick, if we try to put all this in now, you're not going to be able to use the lowest setting, and so you're going to have to start at a higher setting, and again, poof. So we're going to put half of this in. And start on 1. Slowly work your way around. Even on 1 at this point, this flour can go everywhere. So you're just going to want to slowly go around. And you'll know it's time to turn up because you'll actually hear your mixer start to work a little bit harder. When you hear that starting to whir a little bit harder, just turn it up 1. And we're just going to mix this until all the flour is incorporated. And we're going to put in our second half and do the same thing. Alright, so what you end up with is a batter. It's really thick batter, and that's okay. We want it to because we're going to scoop this up and we're going to roll it into balls. So you don't want like a thin batter. You want this to be a pretty thick batter. So what we're going to do now I'm just going to put a little bit of sugar on, I have a lid, but it could be a plate, whatever you want to put it on. Because what we're going to do is take our scoop. So I have a scoop. This just makes certain that all your cookies come out the same size. It's not always necessary, but where we're making ice cream sandwiches, you want all your cookies kind of the same size because you don't want one cookie on the bottom that's big and one cookie on the top that's small. You want them to be about the same size. So I just take a scoop, but if you don't have a scoop, you can kind of eyeball it and just kind of use some spoons. But you're just going to take a scoop. You're going to end up with a ball that's about the size of like a walnut in the shell. And roll it in the sugar. And set it on the pan. So we're going to do that with all of the dough. Just kind of form it into a loose ball. Roll it into the sugar. Make sure it's all covered. You want to make sure these are a good inch and a half apart because they are going to spread. So I'll do one more. Alright, so I am going to go ahead and finish up with these, and then we're going to put them in a 350-degree oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. They'll start to get a little bit of brown around the edge, and you'll see a nice little crackle on the top, and the brown will be nice and brown. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and we'll see you in a minute. Alright, so we are finally here. We finally made it. We've gone through all of our steps. Our cookies are out of the oven. They have cooled off. We can touch them now. You do want to make sure that your cookies are absolutely at least room temperature. You don't want them to be warm at all because the ice cream is just going to melt over them. That's not going to hurt anything. A little mess isn't going to hurt anything. But we're going to fill these, and then we're going to wrap them, and we're going to throw them in the freezer to let the ice cream set up. So our cookies are done. Our ice cream is solid. We have nice scoopable ice cream. I did take this out for a few minutes just to let it melt because that's going to make it easier to put in the cookie and spread. And then we are just going to cover it with our plastic wrap. So this is how simple it is to make. You just take one of your cookies, put the ice cream on, grab your other cookie, and smear down. And that is your gingerbread ice cream sandwich. So now you just take some plastic wrap, cover it up, and put this in the fridge. Or the freezer, not the fridge. So you don't necessarily have to do this step. Well, obviously you have to fill it. But you don't have to put it in the freezer. You can eat it right off. It's just going to be a little messy because the ice cream is pretty melted at this point. So we're just putting it in the freezer to let it kind of set up a little bit. But if you find you just can't wait, you just want to eat it, go ahead. I'm not going to tell anybody. It'll be a little messy, but sometimes a little messy is good. So that is it for this week. These are our gingerbread ice cream sandwiches. You'll be able to find this recipe. It's going to be right on the YouTube channel. It'll also be on the bottom of the children's webpage. So you can find it there. I hope you try this out, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.